I gave that company 22 years of my life. I knew the job like the back of my hand. But when the new boss walked in, he didn't see experience. He saw expense. And within weeks, I was out, replaced by the very intern I had mentored. But what they didn't know was, I wasn't done yet. Let me take you back to where it all started. My name is Sarah, and I worked in the finance department of a mid-sized logistics firm just outside of Cincinnati. I started there back when we still did paper invoices and used fax machines. Back then, we were just 12 people, packed into a one-room office with flickering lights and broken coffee machines. I stayed through 3 relocations, 4 CEOs, and more layoffs than I can count. But I never left, because I believed in what we were building. I believed in loyalty. And for over 2 decades, I was the steady pair of hands that kept the books balanced, vendors happy, and cash flow clean. No fancy titles, no corner office, just results. Real ones. The kind that keep companies alive. Then came Lucas. He was the new VP of Operations, freshly imported from some shiny consulting firm in Chicago. MBA. Expensive haircut, skinny tie, full of buzzwords like agile transformation and synergy acceleration. He looked at the company like it was a game of chess, one he intended to win fast, no matter who got knocked off the board. From the moment Lucas walked in, something shifted. He didn't want to understand how things worked. He wanted to reinvent them. And to do that, he needed to make space, cut costs, streamline departments, trim the fat. Apparently, I was part of that fat. But he didn't come for me directly. He smiled in meetings, called me institutional wisdom, asked me to train a new intern, Chloe, a bright, bubbly 23-year-old fresh out of college. She was sweet, curious, eager to learn. I took her under my wing, walked her through every spreadsheet, every process, gave her shortcuts I'd learned over decades. She reminded me of myself, in a way, but I had no idea she would be stepping into my shoes. Just weeks later. It started small. I was no longer CC'd on certain emails. Meeting invites stopped coming in. Lucas started directing Chloe to sit in on client calls. I chalked it up to mentorship. I wanted her to grow. Then came the Friday morning I'll never forget. Lucas called me into his office, smiling that same corporate smile, and said, "Sarah, we're going in a new direction. Your role has been made redundant. This has nothing to do with performance. It's a structural change." I didn't say anything. I couldn't. My throat closed up. My hands trembled. 22 years, gone with one sentence. They offered me a 2-week severance and an HR packet. No handshake, no thank you. And Chloe? She moved into my desk on Monday. Didn't even look me in the eye. Maybe she was told not to. Maybe she felt guilty. Maybe she didn't care. I went home that day numb. Sat in my car for nearly an hour before I could even turn the key. I wasn't just fired. I was erased. Like I never existed. Like none of it had mattered. But here's the thing about underestimating someone like me. You never see the storm coming. Until it's already too late. I wish I could say I bounced back quickly. I didn't. The first few weeks after being let go were a haze. I woke up at 6 a.m. every morning, like clockwork, only to remember I had nowhere to go. The silence in my apartment was deafening. I missed the hum of the office printer, the clatter of keyboards, the morning coffee runs, even the annoying squeak from the chair in the conference room. But most of all, I missed purpose. And that's when the humiliation really sank in. It wasn't just that I'd been fired, it was how it happened. Quietly, without recognition, without gratitude. After 22 years of loyalty, I was disposed of like an outdated file. And Chloe, someone I had poured knowledge and patience into, had stepped into my place without hesitation. I tried to give her the benefit of the doubt at first. Maybe she didn't know. Maybe she wasn't given a choice. But when I checked LinkedIn one afternoon, her new title was front and center, finance associate, full-time. And there she was, smiling in a group photo, arms crossed, standing right in front of the whiteboard I used to scribble on during Monday meetings. Worse still, the caption read, "Excited to be part of a forward-thinking team that values fresh ideas and innovation over tradition." That hit harder than the pink slip. And then, I started hearing things. A former colleague, Melissa from accounting, texted me late one night. "You okay? It's a mess over here. Chloe's in over her head. Lucas is losing patience but pretending everything's fine. He's even using your old budgeting template like it's his idea." My stomach turned. That spreadsheet had taken me months to refine. I had used it to save the company from 2 near cash flow crises. Now Lucas was rebranding it, and Chloe was presenting it, clumsily, to clients I had built relationships with for years, and they were getting frustrated. Another message came in the next week from a long-term vendor. "Did you leave? Haven't heard back from anyone on the new invoice system. Confused who to contact. Hope all is well." I realized something then. They had replaced me on paper, but not in substance. Lucas might have wanted cheap, but cheap doesn't mean capable. And Chloe, bless her heart, wasn't ready for the pressure of quarterly audits, cash projections, or vendor negotiations. She was trying, sure, but she was drowning in a pool she didn't even know she was in. And Lucas, he was too arrogant to admit the cracks were showing. That's when my emotions shifted. The numbness, the sadness, they gave way to something sharper, cleaner, anger. Not the explosive kind, but the kind that simmers, the kind that makes you sit up straighter, think clearer, move smarter. They had underestimated me. I had built relationships in that company that went beyond job titles. I knew every pattern in the cash flow cycle. I understood our clients, what made them stay, what made them leave. I saw things Lucas never bothered to ask about, and now those blind spots were going to cost him. I wasn't going to scream. I wasn't going to argue. I didn't need to, because I still had one thing Lucas never would: credibility. And credibility, in business, is everything. I started making a few quiet phone calls, nothing dramatic, just friendly catch-ups with people who mattered. Clients, vendors, a retired board member who still had influence. I didn't ask for anything, just reconnected. Reminded them I was still around, still sharp, still someone they could trust. And the more I listened, the more I realized the storm was already coming. Lucas just hadn't looked up yet. It's strange how quiet things can get when you've been cut off from a place you once called your second home. My email account was deactivated, my company badge useless. Even old coworkers were hesitant to reach out. I wasn't just gone. It was as if I'd never existed. It felt personal, too personal. But I didn't wallow, not for long. Instead, I watched. I listened. The updates kept coming, casual mentions from former coworkers, even whispers from clients who had no idea I was no longer with the company. I didn't seek them out. They came naturally. That's what happens when you've spent decades earning trust. People remember. And what I kept hearing wasn't good. Chloe had stepped into my role, but the shoes were far too big. Mistakes on reconciliations, missed follow-ups with key vendors, errors in quarterly projections. The team was covering for her, but they were tired. And Lucas? He was doubling down, pretending everything was under control. He couldn't admit that his cost-saving move was starting to bleed. One of the client managers I used to work closely with reached out in frustration. "Sarah, who's running things over there now? They sent me the wrong invoice twice. It's like they're guessing at numbers." Too disappointing for words. Another vendor emailed me personally, even though I wasn't supposed to be reachable. "Are you still overseeing accounts? Something's off. No one seems to understand how the net terms work." It made me want to scream. How could they be this reckless? But what hit hardest was an old team member, Jenna from payroll, messaging me on LinkedIn one night. "I miss you, Sarah. Things aren't the same. Honestly, they're falling apart. Chloe's overwhelmed and Lucas doesn't care. It's awful." That one hurt. Because despite everything, I didn't hate Chloe. I knew she didn't ask for this. She'd been used, pushed into a role she wasn't trained for by a man who thought experience was overrated and loyalty was irrelevant. Lucas hadn't just replaced me. He had dismantled something that worked and replaced it with smoke and mirrors. And for what? A few dollars saved on a salary line? I began journaling everything I was hearing. I didn't plan to use it, at least not yet. But something told me this wasn't over. The company I gave 22 years to was slowly unraveling, thread by thread. And I wasn't even in the room. The irony? Lucas had built his image on being a savior, the young exec who modernized a stale old system. He gave interviews, shared motivational quotes, even posted a podcast episode titled, "Cutting Cost Without Cutting Corners." What a joke! He had no idea what was really holding things together before he arrived. No clue that corners often hid the people quietly doing the work that made his job easier. And now he was discovering what happened when those people disappeared. Still, I wasn't out for revenge. Not yet. Part of me still hoped maybe someone would reach out. Maybe Lucas would admit he made a mistake. Maybe the company would see the cracks before it was too late. But then, 3 months after I'd been let go, I got a call from someone I never expected to hear from. His name was Carl, a soft-spoken man in his 60s who used to serve on the board years ago. He had since retired, but still held shares and had enough clout to make waves when necessary. He said, "Sarah, I've heard some troubling things. Tell me honestly, is it true Lucas let you go and replaced you with an intern?" I didn't lie. I laid it all out, calmly, factually. No bitterness, just the truth. Carl was silent for a long moment. Then he said, "That's outrageous." He didn't elaborate much after that, just thanked me and said he'd be making some inquiries. I hung up, stunned. Could this actually be the beginning of something? Was someone finally paying attention? I didn't know what Carl would do, but I knew this much. If he was asking questions, others soon would too. And if Lucas thought the worst was behind him, he was in for one hell of a surprise. After I hung up with Carl, I sat there in stunned silence. I hadn't expected anyone to care, let alone someone like him. But he had listened, really listened, and his reaction wasn't lukewarm. It was outrage. That gave me something I hadn't felt in a while. Hope. Still, I didn't count on a miracle. I'd been in the corporate world long enough to know that outrage doesn't always lead to action. But something had shifted. I could feel it. Carl wasn't just a retired board member. He was the kind of man who asked questions when he already suspected the answers. And it wasn't long before the ripples began. A former client, one of our biggest accounts from the Midwest, called me out of the blue. He sounded annoyed, borderline panicked. "Sarah, we've been trying to get answers on last quarter's reconciliation. Nobody's giving us a straight story. You wouldn't happen to be consulting on the side now, would you?" I smiled, almost laughed. Too unbelievable. Just 3 months ago, they kicked me out like a relic of the past. And now their top client was chasing me. We set up a call. Nothing formal, just a friendly review. I walked him through what I would have done had I still been in charge. He took notes, asked if he could loop me in again the following week. 1 call became 3. 3 became 5. I wasn't just back in the game. I was building something new, on my terms. It was empowering, but it was also bittersweet. Part of me still wrestled with the betrayal. Every time I thought of Chloe, sitting at my desk, presenting half-baked spreadsheets I once pored over late at night, I felt a sharp sting of disbelief. How did it come to this? How could someone like Lucas be given so much power and use it so carelessly? But now I had clarity. Lucas hadn't made a strategic decision. He had made an ego move, one based on arrogance, not vision. And Chloe? She was simply collateral damage, set up to fail so he could justify further changes. It made me sick, but anger without action? That wasn't me. So I started moving, not loudly, but deliberately. I reached out to a few old vendor contacts, offered free consultations to some struggling small businesses, and began quietly positioning myself as a trusted advisor in financial operations. The response was overwhelming. Apparently, experience did still matter. One evening, while reviewing an old invoice structure I'd once customized for our biggest client, I got another call, this time from Jenna, the payroll colleague who'd messaged me earlier. Her voice was quiet, cautious. "You didn't hear this from me," she said, "but there was a meeting yesterday, a heated one. Carl was there. He asked very specific questions. About you, about the intern, about missing documentation." Lucas turned pale. My heart skipped. Was it finally happening? Then Jenna added something that made my jaw drop. Carl asked for copies of the last 2 quarterly reports, not the ones Lucas polished for presentation. He asked for the raw data. I couldn't believe it. After months of being silenced and replaced, the truth was finally being unearthed. It was too early to celebrate, but I allowed myself a small smile. Because when people like Carl start digging, they don't stop until they hit the bottom. The moment Jenna told me Carl was digging through raw financials, I knew the clock had started ticking. Lucas had built his empire on polished decks and inflated projections, but raw data doesn't lie. And if Carl was smart, and he absolutely was, he'd start to see the patterns I had spent years managing and correcting. The timing, the gaps, the numbers that didn't quite add up unless you understood the business. I didn't need to lift a finger, because Lucas had already sown the seeds of his own downfall. All I had to do was stay ready. Meanwhile, word was spreading. Vendors who hadn't heard from the company in weeks started reaching out to me directly, asking for help with unpaid invoices or lost records. One of them even said, "We used to love working with your team. Now it's chaos over there. What happened?" What happened? Lucas happened. That's what. I started consulting part-time. Quietly. I helped 3 vendors restructure their receivables. One client asked me to audit their books to ensure they weren't being overcharged under the new partnership with Lucas's firm. They were, by over 12%. Too outrageous. I wasn't just rebuilding my reputation, I was reclaiming my identity. For the first time in months, I felt like myself again. And that's when the email came. Not from Jenna, not from Carl. From Chloe. The subject line was just one word. Sorry. I opened it, unsure what to expect. Inside, a message that felt equal parts apology and confession. "Sarah, I don't know if you'll ever forgive me, but I have to tell someone. I didn't know Lucas planned to replace you. I thought I was shadowing you to support you. The day they let you go, he told me it was your idea to step down. I only realized the truth later, and by then, it was too late. I'm so sorry. I think I'm in way over my head. I don't know what to do." I sat back in my chair, stunned, so it was a lie. A manipulative one. Lucas had told Chloe I chose to leave, that I had stepped aside. No wonder she hadn't looked me in the eye. She didn't betray me. She was used, just like everyone else. How disgustingly clever of him. But Chloe's message wasn't just an apology. It was an opening. I replied, "I appreciate your honesty. You didn't deserve to be caught in this. Neither did I. If you need help, I'll guide you. But understand this. Lucas's actions have consequences, and they're coming." We arranged a video call. She looked exhausted. Dark circles under her eyes, her once bubbly tone now flat. She'd been working weekends, trying to stay afloat. Lucas had been micromanaging her, blaming her in meetings when things went wrong, but still propping her up publicly to maintain the illusion of success. What a coward. But during our conversation, she shared something critical. "Lucas told me to use the Q1 smoothing model you left behind. But when I asked him how it worked, he said to just trust the formula." My heart dropped. That model was a forecasting template I'd built, with one key caveat. It only worked when paired with detailed vendor schedules and seasonal cash flow offsets. Without that context, it would create a wildly inaccurate picture of revenue timing. Oh no. If Lucas had used that in an investor report, and then Chloe said it. He used it for the board update. He said it made the numbers look stronger going into Q2. That was it. That was the nail. He hadn't just cut me out. He'd misused a proprietary tool he didn't understand to present a false sense of security to leadership. I hung up, my mind racing. The storm was no longer coming. It was already here. Now, it was just a matter of who would be standing when it passed. By the time Chloe told me about the Q1 smoothing model, I knew the house of cards was seconds from collapse. Lucas had crossed a line he couldn't walk back from, presenting inflated financials based on a tool he didn't understand, to a board that trusted him blindly. And worst of all, he had done it thinking no one would question him. But Carl wasn't just questioning anymore. He was investigating. 2 days later, Jenna messaged me again. Lucas got pulled into a closed-door meeting with the board this morning. It didn't sound friendly. And then came the email I never thought I'd see. Subject: confidential, request for discussion. From Carl. He asked if I'd be willing to walk him through the real structure of the model Lucas had misused. I agreed, but on one condition: that the conversation be transparent, documented, and shared with the board. Carl replied within minutes, "Absolutely. Malti, we need the truth now more than ever." What followed was a 90-minute call that felt like a courtroom testimony. I laid it out, everything, from the dependencies of the forecasting model, to the missing cash flow controls, to the actual year-over-year dips Lucas had buried under optimistic formulas. Carl listened carefully, asked pointed questions, and took notes. When it ended, he said just one thing: "Thank you, Sarah. You may have saved this company." I logged off and stared at my screen in disbelief. Had it really come full circle? The next morning, news broke internally. Lucas was suspended pending a full audit. Chloe forwarded me the memo, and at the bottom was a line that made me audibly gasp. Effective immediately, the board has retained former senior finance advisor Sarah Whitmore as a temporary consultant to assist with reconciliation and recovery efforts. I was speechless. Just 3 months ago, I was shown the door without so much as a goodbye. Now, they were asking me to help clean up the mess. It was too surreal for words. And yet, I wasn't celebrating. Not yet. Because what came next would define not just me, but the future of everyone who had been caught in Lucas's storm. Walking back into that office felt like stepping into the ghost of a life I'd already buried. Everything looked the same. Same break room, same flickering hallway light. But the energy was different. People greeted me with a mix of surprise and quiet relief. Some even looked hopeful. That part caught me off guard. I wasn't there to take revenge. I was there to restore order. But I'd be lying if I said it didn't feel good to be back on my terms. Lucas, meanwhile, was gone. After the internal audit exposed the extent of his misrepresentations, he was formally terminated. No farewell party, no thank you speech. Just a silent vanishing act. Exactly the kind of exit he had once orchestrated for me. Poetic, really. Chloe resigned a week later. We had one final conversation, this time without guilt or pretense. She thanked me sincerely and said she needed time to figure out who she really was, outside the shadows of people like Lucas. I respected that. She had been used just like the rest of us. My role as a consultant wasn't permanent. But in 3 months, I stabilized what had been broken. I reinstated clean systems, re-established vendor trust, and helped coach the next team of professionals, not interns thrown into the fire, but real hires, properly trained. Then I walked away, this time by choice. No bitterness, just peace. Funny, isn't it? I was once replaced like I didn't matter. And yet when things fell apart, the one thing they needed most was me. Experience, it turns out, doesn't age out. It compounds. I'm now running my own consulting firm, working with clients who value clarity, loyalty, and long-term thinking. The kind of values that don't show up in flashy slides, but keep businesses alive. And to this day, I keep one reminder on my desk. A folded piece of paper that simply reads, "They thought I was gone. I was just getting started." Sometimes the people who get overlooked are the very ones holding everything together. If you've ever been cast aside, underestimated, or replaced without cause, know this: your value isn't defined by a title or a salary. It's defined by your impact, your integrity, and the people who remember you when things fall apart. Have you ever been pushed out unfairly? Or watched someone you respect get replaced by someone cheaper, younger, or more modern? Share your story in the comments. Let's talk about it, because your voice deserves to be heard, and your story might just inspire someone to rise again.